Assume a wingspan of approximately 25 feet. Nose to tail, 32 feet or less.
Okay.
The draft would have been less than 7 feet from the belly to, there was 3, not cupolas, but they were blisters. 3 blisters in a line directly along the spine between the forward sensory array and the tailpipe, which requires an explanation.
Okay.
But there was something I was going to tell you about the aliens, and that was rapid decompression,
Right.
decompression sickness, extremely rapid dehydration, and extreme forces to produce a possible blunt force trauma based on a splash.
Okay.
Now, having set that aside, we were talking about the frog that breathes through its skin. How do we know that they breathe through their skin? Well, Len Stringfield provides us the answer. You and I, when we go swimming in the pool out here, we have semi-permeable skin. It allows us to perspire. It allows us to extrude salts and certain skin oils. It prevents rot bacteria from getting inside our bodies. Semi-permeable tissue does not break down until after death. Their skin, microscopically, was not semi-permeable tissue. It was more like a synthetic screen mesh with the scaling, probably organic, but then so is a lot of the polymers that might have been used for that screen mesh. Synthetic simply means not necessarily plastic. What it means is created by the hands of somebody that was breeding these things and perhaps had come up with a way to breed that skin so that water could pass freely through the tissue, and therefore a highly oxygenated semi-critical fluid of water and freon, highly oxygenated, would have been their respiration. The fluid would have circulated down through the filtration system in the floor, going through a secondary filtration system that would be very much like kidney dialysis. And then it would come out through side panels, very similar to this air conditioner, vents at an angle. The vents would angle backwards, according to Tungate, toward the mission commander at the back of the cocoon, which is the crew cabin. They had screen mesh. That was the incredible thing that Len Stringfield told me. In not so many words, so did Richard Tungate. Richard Tungate said that they had skin that was like amphibians. And he said there's certain kinds of frogs that can breathe through their skin, salamanders, newts. They don't have to come up and gulp air. He says they just breathe through their skin. And he said, think of a saltwater fish tank with some kind of a diatomaceous earth type filtration system. That would be yet a third way of describing the filtration system under the floor. And he's the one that said the texture of the floor was ridged like a mixture of fingerprints and coral patterns. Very, like as if there was, it would have been similar to if you took monkey brains and spread them all over a floor, that would be the design pattern. But he said when you felt it, it felt like coral. which he also described as the same kind of feeling you get when you touch the flight deck of an aircraft carrier in the vicinity of where aircraft wheels slam down onto a hard heaving deck.
Almost like anti-slid.
Anti-skid.
Yes, right.
But this stuff was more unique.
Back to the reactor, Bill. The waveguide that rises up vertically, does it plug into the bottom part of the blister? Where does that reactor plug into? Where does that waveguide terminate?
It's directly below, and it terminates into the ceiling, but the middle blister, which is the highest point on the spine,
Okay.
directly corresponds to that location on the outer hull.
Okay, and now the external convex bulbous top part of the craft itself, does that plug in to a mothership?
No,
No.
it's the tailpipe.
It's the tailpipe. The tailpipe plugs into another ship?
Apparently, there was something, and the tailpipe was at a slight angle off of the center line x-axis,
Okay.
the longitudinal axis. It went up just slightly, and it was rounded. But apparently, its purpose, there was this pink flame that came out of it, steady, in atmosphere. It's theorized that it was electron, that all electrons off the central fuselage and the wing roots would have bled off, both from underneath and definitely from over the top of the hull. And that tailpipe was the bleed-off point. But there was something that would grasp it.
Okay.
In other words, some kind of memory metal or something that would grasp it, so that in normal flight it could relink with the what I would call the main engines of the vehicle, the part of the vehicle. I guess I would call it the engineering part of the stack, where it engineers and eventually produces the warp.
Okay, so do you think, Bill, that there are multiple craft that dock with this larger craft?
No,
No.
it's one per. I'm having another one of those COVID Parkinson's moments. It's the warp drive dish. Because remember, it's large, it's circular, and it's like a dog dish where the edges cant inward slightly, with a long flagpole coming out of the middle,
Right.
straight up. Turn it this way. You have yourself a starship with an arrowhead-shaped end. Like, ever seen an eagle or an arrowhead on the top of a flagpole? Just like that.
Okay. Back to the flight control system, Bill. How did the commands of the pilot get executed to the flight controls?
Directly through either cranium contact with the back of the seat or through the fingertips.
Okay.
And I believe that the control stick for the one guy on the right-hand side of the two forward seats, that would have been what's called a signature handpiece. You've heard of guns with signature grips. And unless your specific infrared pattern, as well as your fingerprints, matches the expectation within the grip, the gun will not fire. You can't use it. It's useless. You might as well just throw it at somebody.
So are you talking about like a symbiotic brain cortex integration between the minds of the pilots and the flight control systems of the craft itself?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's the crux of all of my theories, which are basically hypotheses because we have no way of proving any of this. But I believe in a form of technology that blends well with flesh. Biomimetics, biomimetics. In other words, biomimetics, that's where you're able to create mental remote control of a technical system.
Right.
And biomimetics, which is technology that mimic the function, structure, forms, and sophistication of neural networks of such creatures as octopi and the human brain, or the dolphin brain, or the chimpanzee brain. In other words, the ability to blend living flight crew with the artificially intelligent operating system of the vehicle.
Right.
Now, how do we maintain control of the AI? By definition, the AI should be able to fly the craft with or without a crew.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps you can. Let's take a simple flying saucer disc. It probably can function just fine without an occupant. But its operations would be significantly degraded and impaired, and I don't think it could navigate. Navigation is a huge issue with faster than light travel, because how in hell do you navigate?
Mm-hmm.
You fly planes. I don't have a license, but I can fly them just as good as you. We both drive cars. We got road signs. Nowadays, we got a little map quest computer screen in the middle of my car's console, and yours. We've got road signs, we've got landmarks all around us. We've got lines on the road. We know where we are at relative to where we want to go, which is also relative to where we started from. When you are flying a spacecraft between Earth and the Moon, you have to navigate on a mathematical track that takes into account the orbital velocity of the Moon and the curved ovoid track of its orbit around the Earth, the rotation of the Earth, and the position of the Sun, the position of Mars, the position of Jupiter, and the position of Saturn, in order to create an artificial up, down, east, west, left, right. Because in space, there is no up, there is no down, there is no point of reference except stellar bodies, planetary view, whatever you can see. So navigation is relative, kind of, sort of. So you have to come up, if you're going to do faster than light, you have to have galactic coordinates, which means you got to be able to navigate beyond Earth and the Moon,
Right.
and Mars and Jupiter. How do you do that? Well, first of all, the Earth is rotating, and it's also revolving around the Sun at the same time. So you're sitting in that chair right there. I'm sitting on this couch right here, and this is critical. How do we know where to go? How do they know how to get here? Well, we are constantly moving on a curved vector that is a combination of other vectors all combined at once at varying speeds and velocities that gives us a slightly curved point of direction in space between a moment ago and a moment to come. You and I are moving at 1,000 miles per hour as the Earth revolves around its own axis. At the same time, the Earth is orbiting the sun at however many miles per hour. So we're constantly in motion in two directions. But the sun is also orbiting the center of the galaxy, and it's going up and down. So now we've got 3 and 4 directions that way at approximately 250,000 miles per day, week, month, I don't know. The velocities increase as your perspective moves outward in space. How do you navigate?
Right.
Well, first of all, you got to know your starting point. You need to know the orbital plane and the exact orbit of Earth around the sun relative to the sun's north and south pole. You then have to know the sun's position relative to a whole bunch of pulsars and magnetars that are identified and whose identity is maintained while you are in interstellar space by the frequency of their rotations. That's why they call them pulsars. Pulsars are basically a supermassive star that didn't quite have enough mass to become a black hole. Therefore, it became a compressed material substance whose material weighs approximately a couple of million pounds per teaspoonful. It's matter that is compressed to the point where the electrons and the protons and the neutrons of all elements and materials are compressed together to where the subatomic particles are touching.
Mm-hmm.
This is neutronium, for lack of another. What happens when you compress an electron into a proton? You get a neutron. Pure neutronium. It's the heaviest and produces the strongest gravitational field on the planet, and it's very magnetic. A lot of these dead stars rotate very fast. And light can still escape them, even though it's somewhat bent and warped like a mirage. And they're all over our galaxy in a number of different places. And they're like lighthouses. Each one has its own frequency relative to each other one. Their positions, even though they're constant moving, are still relative because the motions are very slow. The hypothesis is that in addition to being able to see them in four-dimensional space-time, which is length, width, height, and the passage of time combined, which makes up our reality, that if we're in that double bubble configuration of a warp, gravity wells are still visible to sensors.
Okay.
Gravitometers, that kind of thing. I imagine that a spaceship that flies faster than light by divorcing itself from four-dimensional space-time and is either in a realm called subspace or in a realm called hyperspace or in a realm that other people would basically call something ethereal, that you could still visually detect gravity wells. And that there'd be perturbations in the gravity wells due to the rotation of the neutronium. Black holes might still exist, like super black holes at the center of our galaxy. That would be another reference point. That would allow them to navigate from whatever world they come from to ours and back again.
Bill, back to our crash retrieval operation. Now, when Frank Kaufman left the 509th Bomb Group, did he get there before dawn, or was it still dark when they got to the crash site?
It was the earliest part of dawn. It was a pale pink on the horizon,
Okay.
which became a light gray, and the sun rose fairly early. Sunrise around that time, I believe, is around 5:20 in the morning.
Okay.
Maybe
Now,
earlier.
did they have a cordoned off area so that they wouldn't allow any of the public to get to the crash site?
Yeah, that's what you have MPs for. Edwin
Okay.
Easley had a team of a bunch of MPs. Kaufman had between 4 and 8 of his 9 guys. Pappy Henderson was definitely not there. There was also a backup pilot in the event that Pappy couldn't fly. I forget his name. But it's the magic 9 is the magic number for those guys. So you have the MPs, you have the counterintelligence corps guys, you have all of the senior officers' staff.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings the number of people on the ground to well over 40 or 50.
Okay, now next question. Did they manhandle the craft off of the rocky area?
Literally.
Literally. Okay.
Literally. You get a bunch of guys around the edge of the wing and you just start pulling and the thing slides like plywood, like a huge plywood thing. And it probably didn't weigh more than that.
Okay, now did Frank tell you this? Did he describe this to you?
Yeah.
That's what he said.
And then they hoisted it on the flatbed, they covered it in tarps, and he was laughing. He said they trucked it right down through the center of town.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we've got the retrieval operation in full swing now. Approximately how many vehicles left the site and now we're going down Main Street? How many vehicles, perhaps?
The entire procession probably, other than maybe 3 or 4 vehicles, and that would be enough. I'd leave about 8 guys behind, 10 guys behind to do a complete sweep of the top of the arroyo
Okay.
and of everything around, and then start walking backwards
Uh-huh.
as far as they could get the vehicles before they encountered terrain that vehicles wouldn't work on
Okay.
in the general direction. Because based on the way it was impacted, they would have known that it had come from the northwest.
All right, so let's try to throw out a scenario here. Would you say that there were 2 Jeeps up front, then the 18-wheeler tractor trailer low button?
Dude, I don't know. I know they probably didn't take the entire motor pool.
Okay.
My best guess is that the thing was so small and so light once the fluids had evaporated, because that's what supercritical fluids do very fast, is evaporate.
Okay.
Supercritical means that they exist in a condition of agitation molecularly. It means that you can compress more fluid into an enclosed space. It also means that I believe you can get certain types of I don't like to use the word hydrolysis, but I believe electricity or plasma can be generated that way. We're both going to have to review supercritical fluids and what their purpose is.
Okay.
But everybody kept saying supercritical fluids, Freon, and the purest water imaginable.
All right, now Bill, take us to the hangar now. We're in the convoy. We're approaching the 509th Bomb Group, Roswell Army Airfield. We're going to hangar P3, Building 84. What door did they enter into the hangar?
Right through the main doors. The big
Main
one.
doors. Okay, now when we're in the hangar,
The doors are closed,
okay,
leaving enough room for the trucks to withdraw, but to limit visibility. The sun's already up.
sun's already up.
By the time they got back to the base, it was probably about 11 a.m.
Okay. Okay.
So the recovery was less than 7 hours.
All right, now at this time, were they hastily building the wooden crate at this time?
Oh, hell yeah. Everybody was moving fast. And it was only because they were combat veterans that they were all able to work so well,
Okay.
understanding what each sector needed, because they needed to contain the bodies. They needed to get 1 or 2 bodies over to where Glenn Dennis was at the hospital.
Right.
They needed to get dry ice. They needed to have everything. This was a choreography of movement that was going on. Everybody was multitasking all at once. And only people with extreme knowledge of aircrafts, mechanics, nuclear bomb technologies, And all of the practical logistics of combat could have pulled this off as quickly, quietly, and as silently as they needed to do this.
Okay, now next question. Did you speak to Glenn Dennis personally?
Oh yeah,
You
a
did.
lot.
You did. What was his demeanor, and did you believe his account?
I believed it a lot. There was 2 women that he was deeply in love with, and he even admitted that.
Huh.
One was the one that has been identified as the nurse.
Mary Naomi Self?
Naomi South.
Okay.
The other one was Alma Spence,
Mm-hmm.
my math teacher's mom. I've slept in her house a lot. Wonderful woman. Neither one of those girls, I don't think either one of them really did anything to harm his marriage or anything like that.
Okay.
I think he was married. There was a lot of extramarital affairs going on in the 509th.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because people now are no different than people then.
Okay.
You should see all the grabassery down in Florence between everybody at the state prisons. Isolation begets, you know.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Glenn Dennis personally delivers the child-sized caskets to the hangar. Is that true?
I believe so. That's what Randall and Schmidt believed.
All right.
Now remember, that's outside the purview of the investigating I was doing. I have no interest in that.
Uh-huh.
Randall Schmidt, Kent Jeffries,
Yeah, what
Stan
happened
Freeman.
to Kent Jeffries? Why did he change his tune? What happened to that guy?
I have no clue and I don't care. My focus is
Yeah.
bodies and the vehicle.
Okay.
Now, when I built my general composite of the Roswell UFO, Hal Putoff, a physicist, was very interested to hear how when I took it down to the bottom of a 12-foot pool, it had no ballast, it had no keel, it had no weights.
Mm-hmm.
It was sealed tight, air inside, water around it, 12 feet, 48 scale, little miniature model about this big.
Right.
We let it go. It pops up, it starts doing the leaf thing, and then it starts going like this, and going like this, and going like this, and going like this, and it's moving laterally across the pool as it's rising, breaks the surface of the water, flies for a moment, and then until it slows down and floats.
Interesting.
What do we have in a situation like that? Not only something that functions underwater, but we also have a ground effect aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
At a time when there was no such thing.
All right, Bill. Once the crate was made up, now do we already have the first body flight out by Pappy Henderson at this time?
Okay, I used to know the timetable, and in here, my timeline still exists.
Uh-huh.
And it's in this bottom one here,
Okay.
and it's duplicated to another one. There's a little problem though.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me a shitload of viruses.
Uh-huh.
We don't dare put these in your computer until we've devirused them, which we probably can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complete timeline
Mm-hmm.
of not only the Roswell case, but I played with this for 10 years. Something like 67 megabytes worth of human history.
Right.
Starting with Roswell and the intelligence community and just expanding from there in all directions. I am on the autism spectrum, classic Asperger's, brushed by the wings of the locust. But I've always been fascinated with history, and I dare Richard Dolan to have anything like these.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bill, what about Sappho Henderson? Did you ever speak to her?
Never.
Never. Okay. All right.
That's Pappy's wife.
Correct. Now, once they had the crate built up, we know that they did put it into atomic bomb pit number 1. Can you describe what happened next?
Okay, it's very simply this. They loaded debris and parts of the vehicle that had shattered from the lightning explosion into different planes flying different routes. The vehicle itself, I believe they were able to roll it up, kind of like a really fat carpet, and stuff it into the bomb bay of one of the B-29s.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was 100 times lighter than your average atomic bomb. Not that there were average atomic bombs then. You had 3 different configurations. The configuration for Fat Man, the configuration for Little Boy, which they say is a little more efficient than Fat Man was. And then a third version that was on an airplane that was unable to deliver its payload in the Pacific. And that bomb was brought back. Nuclear bombs are so heavy
Yeah.
that the only way to mount them was from underneath, and they would not fit in the bomb bay totally. So they had to winch them up, strap them in, get harnesses, get an armature, like a miniature crane inside the thing, to literally hold it in place against the open doors, or they would remove the open doors completely, because all hatches can be removed on any normal aircraft. And then just hold it there and then take off. And you have to remember, takeoff is a bitch when you have, and we can Google it, the weight of Fat Man and Little Boy, and the other one is public knowledge, it's in Google.
Mm-hmm.
But getting a B-29 into the air, especially in an era where they didn't refuel midair, and still having enough fuel to get to their destination was very hard. I believe that's why Tinian was selected out in the Pacific. Meanwhile, the pits made it so that people couldn't see what was being loaded in through the underneath. Now, what was on the Patterson Field side of Wright Field over here, Patterson Field over here, 2 separate air bases with a bunch of farmland in between. Nuclear bomb storage pits were on both the Patterson Field side and the Wright Field side. Also, it was very easy to dig a pit when you needed to. But things were loaded and unloaded into pits.
Mm-hmm.
When the primary fuselage, wings, and forward sensor array structure reached either Wright or Patterson Field. Now, originally everybody said it was Patterson, but as the years have gone by, you see a lot of TV shows that, oh, it was Wright Field. And the guys are all dead